Okay, let's continue. Any questions regarding the in-class activity? So you know the deadline for submission, right? And I noted that there are already several groups having made their submissions, but as I said, you have to check whether you comply with the requirements for the law report. And now let's continue. If you have no questions regarding the in-class activity, then let's continue with the remaining parts. Causation in law, right? We talk about this one, okay. Okay, now having established that negligence has caused the damage does not necessarily mean that the plaintiff is able to succeed. Why? Because the court will further consider whether the damage is too remote, reasonably foreseeable. So where are we? Go back and we have just passed number 3, causation. Now number 4. Okay, slide number 6. The fourth condition, whether the damage or injury is not remote. That means whether the damage or injury is foreseeable. This is the final point that the court will consider before deciding on whether the claim will be successful or not. Okay, so not remote, foreseeable. Remoteness. To consider whether it is remote or not remote, the test of foreseeability will be applied. So the case illustrating the test of foreseeability, whether the damage is foreseeable, is from this very famous case, the Wagenman case. So to explain this case, better refer to a short video. Of course, you can also read the text, but I think it's more interesting to refer to a video. Okay, just 2 minutes, very short one. The Wagenman case, okay? The Wagenman is about the tank ship dockyard. There was a ship and there was also leakage of fuel oil, okay, in the sea. And the ship was under repair, okay, and it was noted that there was oil spillage somewhere. Then we are talking about whether the damage is foreseeable, right? So the damage due to the oil spillage is foreseeable or not foreseeable. So there was also welding operation, you know. So welding operation, if there was oil, the risk of explosion and fire, right? but they stopped, okay? Welding, the manager realized about the presence of the oil, then they stopped the welding operation. Something will happen if I continue the welding. I think it will be okay. This is what the manager consider. So ask the manager, can we safely continue the welding? The reply was that, yes, you can. I believe that oil is inflammable, not inflammable. I am inflammable. But you must remember to take special safety precautions. So 2 days later, the oil caught fire, extensively damaged the ship. Okay. So they sue the limited company. The fire start from their oil leaking. So the High Court, the defendant was found liable because he considered responsible for all negligence that happened. Then appeal. Okay, the case was appealed. Disapprove the direct consequence test. It was held that the company could not be held liable to pay compensation for the damages. Okay, so that's the end of that story. So in that case, welding, oil burning, right, negligently allow the spill spread the, and then welding operations, right, that is what I've just mentioned. Yes, any questions? Any questions? No, okay. So it was held that a person was only liable for damage which was reasonably foreseeable. The damage in that case was not foreseeable. Therefore, the defendant was not liable. Okay, so it's too remote, not foreseeable. So a man must be considered to be responsible for the probable consequences of his act. The demand more of him is too harsh, demand less is too ignore that. So we have to be reasonable, right? That means not too far remote, right? But if it is close enough, then it should be foreseeable. So that's illustrate the number 4 principles that I mentioned, referring to slide number 6, slide page 6, right? And the court will also look at the nature, the kind of damage to determine whether it is foreseeable or not foreseeable. So the case, the precedent was Trimmon, 1969. That case, the damage to the plaintiff was caused by the rat's urine. You know, rats is already very small. Urine from the rats was unforeseeable, in that case, causing that damage. Okay, but if you are interested, you can read the whole story of this precedent. But in short, the court will look at the nature, the kind of damage to see whether it is foreseeable or not. A wrongdoer is liable if the kind of damage is reasonably foreseeable. We already know whether it is reasonable to foresee that. The precedent is Zheng Chong Wan case. In that case, the plaintiff was a formwork carpenter, the man working on woodwork, carpenter. He worked on platforms which were unstable, and the plaintiff, right, P, okay, P, the third point also from P asked the first defendant, who is his employer, the company, the owner, whether bending steel bars there will save her. The first defendant refused to provide safe equipment for bending the bars. The plaintiff then began to bend the bars using the bending machine, but the plaintiff's hand was injured eventually. What happened was that the plaintiff stepped onto the brake pedal to stop the disc rotating, but the pedal failed. So that means the machine was not safe. The equipment was not safe. Then his middle fingers were crushed by the machine. It was held that the employer had a duty to provide a safe place for his employees, that is, in this case, the plaintiff. So the employer, that is the first defendant, breached his duty of care. And since it was foreseeable, therefore the defendant, the employer, was liable. So here, the key point is whether it is reasonably foreseeable, right? So it is important that the employer provides safe equipment, a safe working environment for his employees, as illustrated in this case. Otherwise, the employer could be in trouble. The plaintiff in this case is the employee, claiming that what? The equipment provided by the employer was not safe. Okay? So that's why many companies, they would be very cautious in employing workers. They have to provide their employees, the workers, safe equipment, safe working environment, safe tools, right? The employer has the responsibility, all right, as illustrated by this case. Okay, one more key point. Extent of damage and how it was caused. Eggshell skull rule. This is a very famous rule. What does it mean? The key point is the defendant, D, must take the plaintiff, P, as D finds P. So when you come across an egg, if you know that the egg is very weak, very easy to break, that means if your employee has some disability, very weak, right? Then you need to be careful. Why? Because so long as the harm is foreseeable, you as the defendant is liable for the full extent of the damage, right? Even though that extent results from his own weakness or some uncommon defects. This is a very interesting case, Yip Mao Leung case, Hong Kong U. Okay, not Poly U, Hong Kong U. This case, the defendant, 2000, that case was Hong Kong U. The plaintiff Yip Mao Leung. Okay, what was that? The plaintiff Yip, right, was an artisan, like a technician, like a tradesman. Okay, working at Hong Kong U. Maintenance, doing some maintenance repair work. He suffered in total 3 separate episodes, 3 incidents, 3 events. He sprained his wrist. Okay, sprained his wrist. Well, so the first incident was on November 5th, 1994, when he was playing badminton. Okay, now the technician likes playing badminton. That was the first accident. And then after that, got hurt, right? Underwent physiotherapy. Then in 1996, May, The same plaintiff injured his same wrist. Okay, same wrist. The first case was due to playing badminton. The second case, accident at work. Now, this is really at work, okay? At Hong Kong U, when a rope he was pulling snapped suddenly. So second accident was at work. The first accident was at playing badminton, okay? Then 1999, right? The third accident, making screws at work, okay? 3 accidents. The third one is making screw at work. The plaintiff was a keen sportsman. He liked playing badminton, right? The first incident, right, got hurt was in 1994. So an issue was whether the first and third incidents should be taken into account in assessing plaintiff's degree of impairment. What was held? Under the eggshell skull rule, weakness, okay, special characteristics of the plaintiff. Once a wrong was established, the tortfeasor, the wrongdoer, in this case, the defendant, must take the victims, in this case, the plaintiff, as they found them. Okay? So it was held that the defendant was liable. Okay? So although some peculiar weakness, that peculiar weakness in this case was what? Was due to, firstly, the first accident of the artisan playing badminton, hurting his wrist. Already weak, okay? Weak wrist after the first accident. Then you have to take the condition of that artisan, even though his wrist was weak already. Okay? So, and the second point is liable for the full extent of the damage. Okay? So like someone like a weak, easy to break eggshell skull rule. Okay? So under the eggshell skull principle, all 3 accidents must be taken into account, not just the second or the third, because the second and the third were at work, while the first was not at work, right? Was playing badminton. So, but all the 3 accidents must be taken into account. His ability to perform his duty as an artisan and his enjoyment. The second injury increased the vulnerability to further injury was a foreseeable consequence. Okay? So a defendant may argue that he is liable only for scenario A, but not liable for scenario B. Okay, for example, overturning a burning lamp, one could reasonably foresee, while explosion resulting from the overturned lamp, unable to foresee. But the court only look at the result of the accident. There is only one type of accident, not how the damage was caused. President Hughes and Lott advocate. Okay, this is another principle of causation. Okay, final part, defense to negligence. I will stop here. Okay, and I will reserve this part to be covered after the test. Okay, but just one point briefly mentioned to you now, contributory negligence is, to reduce the liability of the defendant, there could be various defenses that the defendant may rely upon. One of which is contributory negligence from the plaintiff himself or herself. Say the plaintiff himself or herself have done something wrong, leading to the injury of himself or herself. Then partly the problem was due to the plaintiff himself or herself. That is contributed by the plaintiff himself or herself. Therefore, the liability of the defendant, that is the tortfeasor, could be reduced. Okay, that is only one point. The other points I would like to explain to you later. Okay, so references. Okay, a brief introduction. The first one, this is a very classic textbook for tort law, and it's specific for Hong Kong situation, but this book is quite thick and not easy to read. Okay, but serving as a reference, it is good. Okay, the other one here, building management in Hong Kong, it contains a lot of cases related to building management, facility management. Okay, and not that difficult to read. And the third one and the fourth one are the two business law textbooks, but they are easy to read, covering most of the materials, the principles I've just covered. Okay. Okay. Then any questions? Now, if no, then just a final reminder regarding the submission. This is the deadline for your submission, okay? 23rd February, noon time for this law report, okay? Okay. Any questions? No? Okay, thanks for coming.